everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at RHC Podcast. Respect, humility, empathy. Those are always the three tools that we're using to talk about some very deep issues sometimes. And today we got a very serious topic with a very special guest, Robert. Robert, this is going to be your third time on the podcast.
All right. Well, I hope that I feel about it the same way on the third time as I did the first two. It was well worth my time the first two times. So.
Yeah, actually, I just really want to thank you. You've been, in my opinion, what I would call like an ideal guest. You're very respectful. You're very intelligent. You're just an all-around good guest, and I really enjoyed talking to you.
Well, thank you. You've been an excellent host. So it goes both ways.
So, what do you think about the overall, message of RHG podcast and just what I'm trying to accomplish here?
Honestly, I think it's a good idea to try to build bridges between the way different people see the world. Building those kind of lines of communication is kind of how we grow, not only as individuals, but as cultures, as communities and whatnot. I think when a community is too isolated within itself and not exposed to others, it can become very us versus them, very self-destructive, very toxic, very isolated. I think we need those kinds of lines of communication to exist, even if we aren't ever necessarily going to agree.
That is a very, very good point. You put it, you said it just exactly how I would say it, because obviously at the end of the day, there's some irreconcilable difference between you and I. What I am as far as a Christian is so deeply ingrained into who I am. It's my whole life. So for with you or Muslim or Jew or Hindu, there's always going to be that divide there, and I don't feel like I'm out of line to make that well known. But that on the other hand, that does not mean that one, we can't be friends. Two, that we can't learn from each other. I cannot even tell you, Rob. I think we've done about 20 podcasts so far. I cannot put into words how many things I've learned dealing with atheists, with Muslims, with animists, with agnostics. It's been a very eye-opening experience for me. So I really want to thank you for your contributions. So I know that you're in an anti-theist group, but you are one of the least hostile towards the concept of God or religion of atheists that I've met, or someone in an anti-theist group, because I think there's a spectrum, right? There's a spectrum as far as one, how dogmatic you are, and then two, also some atheists will say, "Hey, I wish I believed in God." Like, where do you fall on there as far as? I don't know. I just don't see a lot of hostility towards you. Can you kind of enlighten me?
Because I'm hostile to certain things that I believe are wrong and that I consider to be dangerous. But that does beliefs or ideas. But I am not hostile to people. At the end of the day, people are what I'm going to be dealing with most of all. People are the ones that I'm having these conversations with. And I try not to swear too much with these kinds of things. It really bothers some people, even if it doesn't bother me. But when it comes down to it, if I'm going to be dealing with people, over the matter of ideas, I can't hurt ideas. I can hurt people, and I don't want to hurt people. I want to help people. I want to reason with people. I want to get along with people. I want to coexist with people, and that requires a certain degree of manners, for lack of a better word. Manners cost nothing. Manners are completely free. I can be very hostile to Christianity. It's still very nice to Christians.
Separate for a second the belief from the people, okay? Because on our next episode, Darrington and I, Darrington?
I'm bad with names. So.
Long hair guy?
Oh, okay, yes.
So we're going to be actually discussing this Saturday what we find to be the most appealing sides of the other people's perspective, which is, goes a long way as far as empathy goes, to talk about, hey, what's good about the other side? And one of the things I find to be the most appealing about atheism is that most of the atheists I know, and of course, this is, I'm painting with a broad brush here, but most of the atheists I know are generally good people. They're intelligent. They generally tend to be humanists, which I think is a very good thing. And you don't hear a lot of hate speech as you hear coming out of a lot of Christians. So, in that sense, I have a lot of respect for atheists. Being an atheist for many years, I know it naturally forces you to think more logically and scientifically.
If I don't, I hate to say it, but this is not necessarily the case. I mean, if and this is one thing I will say, I will criticize the atheist community in general is I'm an atheist, therefore I'm smarter than all the believers.
Right.
No, you're not. You disbelieving one thing that's not true is a far cry from putting yourself up in the top 10% of the average intelligence of everybody else. It's just not how that works.
Absolutely.
So you can be an atheist and completely illogical. You can believe absurd things. Not falling for one thing, not believing one thing doesn't mean you're going to necessarily be good at believing correct things 100% of the time. So not to interrupt, but go ahead. Continue.
No, that's 1000% true. And I'm just talking about by and large. By and large, a lot of Christians I've met have hateful ideas. And I know what it is because as Christians, we believe that we're fallen creatures with sin in our lives who fall short of God's perfect image all the time. So the reality of that, Robert, is it makes us very uncomfortable because me as a Christian, being a believer 7 years, there's still sins in my life that make me very, very uncomfortable that I continually do. And one of the ways I can avoid looking at myself is to look at others. And this is what you see a lot of Christians do. So I understand the defense mechanism that they do. But again, that's not to say every Christian does that. It's just it's a trap that you can fall into. So I really dislike whenever atheists, when I get online and, sometimes I'll ask a question and I'll respond. And then they immediately come up with like, I'm an idiot. I don't know what I'm talking about. Da, 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 da. So I get that. I'm not saying that they're always smart or always a lot. There's a wide range of why people are atheists. So I'm just saying that has been my experience. Is that 100% the case? No. Is it 100% the case that Christians are judgmental and hateful? No. It just happens to happen a lot. People have made this argument that Christianity is like a crutch or they hide behind the Bible. And I think that's very true. Like I find myself doing that myself. But that being said, I want to know what's separating the opinion from the people. What has been your experience with Christians?
Do you want my experience with Christians back when I was one, or do you want after the fact, or?
You were a Christian? What the hell happened to you?
I grew up as a Christian. I was the kid that would ask for new Bibles at Christmas. I was very, very devout a long, long time ago. I grew up I spent most of my most formative years in a little place called 6 Mile, South Carolina. I attended every church service. I went to vacation Bible schools. I, did the church, I rode in the church truck during the parade to throw, candy to people. I had, all of my media centered around very Christian materials. My mother made me get rid of Castlevania 2 when it came out because it had holy water as one of the weapons you could use against vampires. She made me get rid of my Dungeons and Dragons stuff in the early 90s because there was a big picture of like this demonic dragon coming up from below. And she was like, no, this is satanic. That's the environment I grew up in. I was once a very, very devout Christian. And at one point I wanted to be a minister. My great grandfather on my father's side actually was. So the deconversion story, however, is a very long one. And I know that wasn't the focus you want. I don't mind going into that, but you need substantial time.
Okay, let's just say now. Let's just say now is made this because obviously people's opinion of you is going to change. And by the way, I don't know why the hell your mom would be angry if they're using holy water as a weapon. That actually shows that it works, right?
I
Don't
won't
answer
pretend
that.
to
Don't
understand
answer
your
that.
thinking there. It's like you're vampire hunting. You're trying to go after Dracula. I don't know. I don't.
That was a joke. Don't answer that question. That was a joke.
Yeah, it's my
Laugh,
mom's
Robert.
grandmother.
When I tell jokes, Yarrington knows this. When I tell jokes, you're obligated to laugh. Okay. So just if it's a pity laugh, give it a pity laugh, and then let's go on to the next one. Okay. So
Okay.
yeah. What about
So
now? What?
the short version of the answer is that it hasn't been good. My experience. If modern American Christians were the first experience I had with Christianity, I wouldn't want a damn thing to do with it. And I don't know why anybody would. And because when I was younger, evangelical was synonymous with good. All right. It was, that was a long, long time ago. But even, I was still a believer back then. So within my circles, that would have been the case regardless. But I know nationwide, evangelicals were not seen as very bad people or anything like it. But at some point over the last, however long you want to pin it down, if you want to go back to Barry Goldwater or just start with the present or the last administration, Christianity has so heavily politicized itself that it has essentially sold itself out for power. And it has become very nasty as a result. My younger girl was actually pulled out of school at one point because of the hostility of certain Christian children. They would taunt her about how her older brother had passed away, how he was burning in hell, and how she was going to burn in hell too. And she had to be pulled out of school for it. Because her mother is Jewish, and because she didn't believe in God, this was the treatment that she got. And this is in a very reasonable city, where you don't expect that kind of thing to happen, and it does. And nor is it uncommon. I've had to work with people occasionally who were trying to get out of their extremely oppressive environments. There was one guy some years ago, he came out as gay to his parents, and then they were going to throw him out because they weren't going to have his ungodly lifestyle in their home. He hadn't even graduated high school yet at the time. No job, no money, and was about to be on the streets because of his Christian parents. Said that, what was the verse that they chose? What has righteousness to do with unrighteousness? And kicked him out, and we're going to kick him out of the house. I managed to get him connected to an organization that was, last I heard, able to find him housing. I didn't stay in touch, but hopefully he's doing okay now. But those kinds of stories are very common. Most of the LGBTQ youth that are on the streets because their religious parents kicked them out on the street. That's about a third of them. That's about a third of the homeless kids in the country. To me, that says that there's something wrong with the belief system. A one-off is a one-off, but if it happens that often, there's a problem that is systemic to the system itself, endemic to the system itself.
So as a father, I can tell you there is no scenario, and I'm talking about, I don't care if my daughter turned out to be the worst serial killer in the universe. I don't care if she topped Dahmer and Bundy and whatever. There is nothing in the world that would ever that my daughter could ever see that would stop me from loving her.
And I think that's true of most. I mean, remember I don't know if you were here during the whole wedding cake fiasco. There was a Christian bakery that refused service to a gay couple. They were getting married, and the couple got harassed so badly that after the story broke in the the lawsuit and whatnot, it was leaked by, if I remember correctly, and you probably want to fact check this one. If I remember correctly, it was leaked by a member of it was either one of the bakers or their legal team or something like that. The information about the couple got out. It made its way through some religious circles, and they got harassed so badly they basically had to go into hiding.
Well,
the bakers got a lot of heat too. Ended up having shut down and work from home and some other stuff too, as I recall. But
if you listen to the episode with Marshall, and I don't want to talk about this too much. In fact, we're going to transition right over. But I am under the impression, under the persuasion that homosexuality is a sin. I do personally believe that it's not moral, but on the other hand, um, you'll never see me using a homophobic epitaph. You'll never see me voting to stop them from having rights. Um, I do believe that they should be allowed to marry, and I do believe that they should be allowed to live in peace without being harassed. I feel like I'm against hate speech. Hate speech. So if someone is engaging in hate speech, that's something that I think that society, and I don't know have all the answers to that, but I do believe that a speech that is likely to cause harm to someone, not just mentally, but also physically, because some of these people do get attacked. I do believe that that should be criminalized in some way, or there should be some kind of a punitive ability to sue the person. But I don't want to go off.
No,
I don't want to.
yeah,
I don't want to go off. I don't want to go off. I don't want to go off in this tangent because we are going to transition immediately. If you'd like to discuss more about specifically that topic,
sure.
we could talk very specifically about that topic because I am under the impression, as more of a libertarian, that the Christian bakers, if they don't want to make the cake for them, they should have that right as far as the in the private sector to not make the cake. As far as the government goes, like I don't believe the government has that right to distinguish one way or the
I,
other. So,
I went back and forth on that one myself. I did. You know, on the one hand, it's like, well, they're private sector, it's their property,
right.
and they should have the right to refuse service. You know, if they want. On the other hand, they're reliant on the entire body of taxpayers in order to conduct business securely. A gay person pays taxes to support the judges, the fire department, everything else that maintains the roads. And if we could start shutting people out of economic life because we don't necessarily agree with how they're living their own private lives, you're creating a kind of a soft segregation. And I don't think I kind of went the other way on it and said, because everybody participates in supporting public life, if you choose to engage in business with the public, then you must serve all of the public. We don't want doctors to be like, oh, I don't work on Black patients. We don't want firemen to be like, oh, that house is owned by someone who is Jewish. We don't want the cable company to be like, oh, well, I don't want to serve Christians. We want everybody to be able to participate in the economic life of the nation. That's part of what our freedom necessitates. So I kind of went the other way on it. I understand the other position, and I'm not saying it's without merit, but I went the other way.
Yeah, and I get exactly what you're saying, but as far as firefighters, again, that goes, or the cops, that goes with the general government. And so I'm saying like that, I don't believe that in any way, shape, or the word. But ultimately, what I said with Marshall is that if you're discriminating against like that against people, that the invisible hand is going to shut you down. So I just don't think you should be compelled to do it. I believe that the market will naturally shut you down. That being said, I do want to transition because you did mention your son, and wow, as a father, there's nothing I could possibly say to. I don't want to try to give you any kind of cliches about that because I can't imagine what it's like to go through that. So I do want to ask you some questions, though. But what advice do you have to anyone who suffers loss or grief?
Everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no one size fits all. There's no silver bullet. There's no magic incantation that I can utter that if you do this, you will recover. Everything will be fine, because that's just not how things work. I would tell you that, I would tell somebody that there's no timetable on recovery. There's no timetable on coping with grief. There's no timetable on coming back to the rest of the world. It may take longer for one person than it does for another. And that's okay. I think one of the most important things that helped me was finding some way to honor the ones who have passed in the way that we live. maybe do something charitable or helpful, or, you know, for example, when you know, my son, he opposed the death penalty, and so we asked people to donate in his name to various anti-death penalty advocacy groups, because he said it wasn't fair that people could be killed for things they didn't do. Irony, right? You know, you're never going to be at a point where you're not mourning, where it just goes away and everything is the same, because nothing is ever the same after that. You just kind of learn to live with it.
I think after I lost my mom, I came to the conclusion that I would only ever be 90% of well as I could possibly be, because it didn't matter how happy I ever got, for example, when I became a father or when I became a Christian, that eventually the thought would come, I wish I could share this with my mom. And so that it put a like a placeholder as far as the happiness that I could enjoy. I mean, I would say this, that in relation to my mom, I tell people this, like, I would say I love my mom more than I loved my whole family combined. But if I were to judge my love for my mom with my daughter, I would say it would maybe fill up the pinky of my daughter, because I have that much love for her. So I couldn't, it's hard for me to even fathom that as a Christian, I do believe that I would be united with my daughter. But how does atheism play with you as far as providing me any kind of solace? Or to me, I got to tell you, Rob, I wouldn't envy that at all, to not have some kind of belief in an afterlife. Like, even if it was a lie, I would probably prefer to believe it just to get me through it. But how does that factor in for you?
Atheism doesn't provide you with any solace, because it's not meant to. It's just a single answer to a single question.
Mm-hmm.
I draw solace from different sources, from friends, from family, from, you know, my community, and the way in which I live. Those things provide real comfort, real solace. I mean, I understand the appeal of, oh, I'm going to see this person again someday. I totally get that, and that's something I wish was definitely true. But if you were to ask, well, you know, don't I wish I could believe that? I can certainly understand that desire, but I value the truth too highly to just try and convince myself of something. You did ask me before if I thought theism provided a better way of dealing with grief. And I would say, are comforting lies truly desirable? I mean, it's hard to say. It's a nice thought, you know, but do we want to live by lies that make us feel good? I mean, we could just get drunk and have that, you know, have that same of, oh, I feel better now, but it's not real. It's not, it's right. A temporary thing. To me, when you talk about, oh, well, if I have this belief, it may not be true, but it makes me feel good. Okay, well, that's just burying reality. That's not truly healing. That's just pretending that there's nothing wrong. I would much rather confront my grief, confront the facts, and learn to live with it on reality's own terms. It's not always the easiest thing, but I think it's healthier.
1000% respect your tenacious desire to pursue the truth, and I get that totally. One, personally, I obviously do not believe it's a lie, because I mean, I have personally experienced Jesus Christ. So I have, on a scale of 1 through 1,000, I have absolutely 0% that 0% belief that that's actually a lie. So in that sense, I don't believe that it's a lie. Obviously, I wouldn't go along with it if I thought that it was a lie. Because whenever I was a believer before I became an atheist, I believed that it was true, and then I had kind of like a reality rude awakening, and I deconverted because I just didn't believe that it was true at the time. And had I not experienced Jesus Christ, I would not I would continue not having a belief in God. That being said, I will say that, I don't know, I guess kind of like a utilitarianism argument I might make is that, I guess kind of like something like a placebo effect, like if you're spending your time, if you have some kind of higher belief, whatever, that might get you to something, it might be useful for you. For example, did you ever see the movie Life is Beautiful with Robert Benigni?
That movie, that name, same kind of sounds familiar, but I don't think I actually saw it.
So it's a movie about the Holocaust, and the guy in there, Robert Benigni, him and his son actually get captured and put into a concentration camp. And it's believe it or not, it's a comedy movie. I mean, that's a rather bizarre, like, Holocaust / comedy, but it's not making light of the Holocaust at all. What it is that he convinces his son that they're just playing a contest and that they need to win, and they need to win the contest. And the way that they're going to win is by overcoming all the obstacles of the Holocaust, of the concentration camp. And so at the end, the father dies, but the son winds up living. I'm sorry, I just gave a spoiler alert if you haven't seen it yet. But anyway, he that belief actually is something that the young boy is believes in. He generally believes. He's convinced him the way through that that this is all some kind of game and they're just overcoming these obstacles. But I mean, that being said, the level of respect that I have for that, for your opinion, just a tenacious honesty in your own mind. Again, I don't agree for 2 seconds on your premise because I know it's not a lie on a personal level, experiences that I've had. But if that's what you genuinely believe and you hold to that, that is the level of respect that I have for you is off the charts, bro. If you could choose, if there was a God or afterlife or whatever, would that be something that you would want to have, or do you have kind of like a Hitchian response to that? They're like, thank God that there's not heaven. I think you said.
Actually, if I could snap my fingers and, oh, there's a deity, there's an afterlife, and all those other things, oh, I totally would.
You would.
I mean, who wouldn't? I mean, that would be, that would
Hitchens,
be
apparently.
Sorry?
I said Hitchens, apparently.
I would prefer a world or a universe in which there was a deity. I just don't believe we have one.
I see.
I don't see any reason to think there is. And I don't go by what I want. My whole family is religious, and when they found out that I had kind of deconverted and left Christianity, they were all very upset. And they still occasionally send me religious materials and wanting to converse with me. And my older sister, called me once to talk to me about this kind of thing. Sent me a book. I wish I'd thought to bring it out, but Reasons to Believe, I think, was the title. But it was like Faith in a Skeptical Age, something like that. But she called me up to talk about the book, and I promised that I would read it, and I did. And one of the things she brought up in the conversation was, well, our mom and dad are very, very old. They're nearing their 90s or in their 90s now.
90s?
She said, well, they're old. My parents are very old.
So wait. They had you when they were like 45?
Thereabouts, yeah. I mean, I don't know.
What?
Yeah, and I got a younger sister too. She's 2 years younger than I. Yeah. But
I don't mean to laugh. I don't mean to laugh. That's just amazing that your parents were having sex. They're like, whoa,
yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
They've been, it's fine.
I'm sorry.
But no, it's fine. But she said they're very, how old they are and don't I want to see them again? Well, that doesn't really have anything to do with it. I don't base my beliefs on what I want to be true. I base them on what is evidently true to the best possible evidence that I can discern. If I have a good reason to believe, then I will. If I don't, then I shouldn't. And it would be dishonest to proclaim that I do. Now, I believe you when you say you are sincere, and I believe you experienced Jesus at some point, but obviously I don't believe that you actually did. You can be honest and be wrong. But if I were to choose to believe something because I wanted it to be true, I would be fundamentally dishonest.
Yeah. So, I get that. And the best way I could explain that to you, Robert, is if you told me that my daughter didn't exist. And I said, no, like Robert, she's generally, like, I know she exists. Like, I experience her, like, all the time. And even if I went and pulled her out, she's sleeping right now, waking up in about 15 minutes or so. But if I went in there and I woke her up right now and I brought her in there and I waved her around, and you said, oh, that could just be photoshopped or whatever. Like, that would make absolutely zero relevance, whatever you think is real or not real, if I've experienced something. So to me, and I don't try to, as you know this, Robert, I'm not here to argue with you or try to convince you one way or the other. I do go by what I've experienced, and I will tell you this: the last time I ever saw my mother, I told her I didn't believe in Jesus Christ. She actually, look, I'm going to show you this tattoo right here. See this Egyptian sun god right here? I got that tattooed on me, and then when I was in South Korea, and then I went home for Christmas, and my mom wouldn't talk to me at all because she was so upset. She was upset as it was that I was overseas partying and acting in total. My parents are ministers, and so the last time I saw her, she was very upset that I stepped away from the faith, and I couldn't, I just couldn't understand. I told her I didn't believe in God, and I told her, and I regret telling her this. I was very upset with her because she had told me at one stage in my life that if I converted to Islam, that she wasn't going to have a relationship with me. And that was like just devastating, especially like, I can't even fathom that now as a father. Like if my daughter would have ever been to something else, that I wouldn't have a relationship with her. So that mystifies me now as a father. But I had a lot of resentment with her because when I dropped out of Bible college because I became an atheist at Bible college. Later on, I went back to Bible college because I was trying to find God and I was trying to make my parents happy and everything. But she told me that, she said flat out, like with no regard for my feelings or anything, she said, well, good, now I have something to brag about you again. And she like just ripped my heart right out of my soul, man. And wow. I felt like I know, I can't even put it into words. And so I wound up getting all the world religions tattooed on me as a result. And I wound up committing as much intentional blasphemy as I could. But anyway, I told her, I said, I believe you and my dad have wasted your whole lives on something that's a lie. And I broke her heart. Like I was a very spiteful thing to say to her, but she died 4 months later. And actually about 6-7 years after that fact, I told my father for the first time, because I didn't want to have the same thing happen with my dad. So I told my dad, don't ever mention the name of Jesus Christ to me again. He wanted to pray for me. And I said, by the way, this is me. Look, this is me in another life. Can you see this, Robert?
Yeah, I do.
I was very interested in Islam at a stage in my life. So anyway, that being said, 2 days after I told my dad is whenever I had the encounter with Jesus Christ. It totally changed my life. So, I mean, I am very well convinced that there is a God, but that's not really the topic here. I wanna ask you another question. I think one of the things that one of the things that I think is also, it compounds with grief, is seeing the effect that a loss can have on people that you love. So, for example, there's not just a loss that you're going to feel, but then there's a loss that you know that your wife is going to feel that you love, which is probably would be more inconsolable than you would be, I would assume, any mother. But then also to your children, so you have to also worry about their grief. So, what was your experience with that, Robert?
Well, I mean, I don't like to put too much of their business out there. That's
Mm-hmm.
for them to kind of talk about, but
Mm-hmm.
if they were to choose to. But my speaking for myself and how it was kind of shared amongst the family, I would say it's in some of it is downright odd. For example, my daughter used to be she used to be very princess pink everything and whatnot, and then after her little brother passed away, she started getting into a lot of the stuff that he did. And from what I understood from grief counselors, this is something that happens a lot. One sibling passes away and another starts taking on some of the traits of the one who is gone as a way to kind of fill the gap. And that hasn't changed. She took on a lot of the traits that he had, kind of filled in some of that space. Whether she meant to or not, it was something she more or less did subconsciously. She became less girly and more of a tomboy to kind of fill in that empty space. All in all, it was, everybody treats these things differently. And there's no one clear way to answer it. So I really don't know how I can express this. I really don't have the words for it. Journaling was one of the things that, for example, my wife would scrapbook, my kids they would journal, and I went off to do to focus on my work. I got sent off to Afghanistan a couple of months after that, which is one of the reasons why I eventually decided to leave the Army. I got a compassionate reassignment, and then they sent me to Afghanistan. Worst travel agency ever is not a joke I tell without being sincere. But it was a really, really difficult time for us. And
you said your wife is a Jewish?
yes, I mean, she's non-practicing. She still keeps some of the traditions, but she's not a believer either.
Is she an atheist as well, or like an agnostic, or what?
Yes. She would best be described
as a yes
as
or no?
Atheist. Well, it depends on how you want to define the terms, but I would say she was more atheist than agnostic.
Okay. So,
as we use the terms.
Okay. So do you actively like tell your children that there's no God, or what is your view? What?
No, I don't see any reason to do that. I mean, they know I don't believe, but we have a number of different religious books in the house, and I make sure they're well educated in these subjects. We have a Quran, we have various Bibles, we have, the Jewish Talmud, we have, some Hindu Vedic texts, we have books on various mythologies. My younger girl got interested in Wicca, so I bought her some books on that. I don't see any need to impose atheism on my children.
So
I want them to, I simply teach them reason, logic, science, and if I teach them how to think, I won't have to teach them what to think. I don't need to indoctrinate them into a belief system. They'll come to the correct conclusions on their own.
So what would your thoughts be if one of your children would came out to the closet to you and say, I'm a Christian?
So would you like some pizza? Or do you want pineapples on your pizza or just pepperonis this time? Honestly, it wouldn't. I mean, when one of them wanted to attend a church service, we have a church just down the street. They were allowed to go. I offered to take them if they were interested. My oldest, she was, my oldest girl, she was never interested. To her, it was nothing more than, just one of those subjects she had to learn to understand her culture, history, and everything else. But she never had any belief and was never interested in, converting to anything. But the offer was always there. Take you to synagogue, take you to a mosque, take you to whatever you want, just to get you that experience and make your own decision.
You know what? I think that's such an amazing outlook, Robert. I remember whenever I was in maybe around fourth, fifth grade, I asked my mom. We're learning about some stuff at school, and I came home and I said, "Hey, Mom, like, what's Hanukkah?" And she looks at me and she's like, "You really want to know what Hanukkah is?" And I was like, "Yeah. Like, why would I be asking you?" She's like, "All right." So then she wound up taking us down to. She wound up taking me down to a synagogue to practice Hanukkah there. And we were poor Mexicans from the east side, man. But she got us out of there, and she immersed me into a totally different world. And I will never, to the day I die, I'll never forget that experience, because I remember the food and the music and the dancing. It just left such an impression on me. And actually, at a later stage in my life, as a non-believer, winding up going into Israel and practicing Hanukkah there amongst the Jews. So, but I would really love my daughter to have an experience with other cultures, with other religions, as far as Hinduism and Buddhism, just so that she could see what else is out there. I do plan on raising my daughter Christian, absolutely, but I don't want to indoctrinate her and brainwash her. So as it is, my daughter's not even, well, she just turned 3, and she's already seen 3 different countries. So she's already been to America, China, and Korea. So I plan to emphasize traveling and experiencing different things. So I think I'm just really impressed by your attitude on that, Robert. Honestly, out of all the things that you told me, I might be most impressed with that one. Okay, so I want to preface this by saying, growing up, so I'm Mexican, right? I'm Mexican, but growing up, I would visualize myself as being white. I would imagine myself. In fact, I used to dye my hair blonde, but I used to imagine myself with blonde hair and blue eyes. I thought that was like ideal beauty for me. But I really hated being Mexican. Like, hated being Mexican. It's not until I moved overseas and started to try to be Korean that I started to fall in love with my own hate. But I'm not sure if you ever saw the movie Coco.
No, I can't say I have.
You know what it's about?
Nope, never heard of it.
Okay, so it's about Day of the Dead for the Mexicans. It's a Mexican holiday, and my daughter was about 3 months away from being born, and my grandmother had just died. And so this story is about Day of the Dead, where they celebrate the dead people. And I remember they dress up like skeletons and stuff, and they dance around. And I remember thinking it was the most barbaric practice in the world, and I hated it. But now, as an adult, I look back and I embrace my Mexican heritage, and I want to teach my daughter Spanish because she is half Korean, half Mexican. And I think about this, what a beautiful holiday this really was, where they take this day out of the year and they celebrate the person's life with food and with pictures and stuff like that. So I want to ask you, how do you celebrate your son? Like, do you guys still, do you still talk about him? Do you still do holidays or anything like that? How do you remember him?
I get a birthday cake every year for his birthday, and light a candle, and we talk about him some, and share some memories and whatnot. Put together a whole book some years ago. Just anytime you remember something about him, you write that memory in the book, and it's I think we filled 2 of them now.
Oh,
So
you just put a lot of chills in my body, buddy.
Yeah. In fact, his birthday would be tomorrow.
April 1st?
Sorry?
April 1st? Or is that April 31st?
Tomorrow's the 31st, March 31st.
Tomorrow's the 1st for me. Okay, so my mom actually died on my birthday, which yeah, it actually wasn't my birthday in South Korea, but it was my birthday in America because of the time difference. That's why I
Oh,
thought tomorrow was the first. Um, yeah, actually, in 2 weeks it'll be 13 years. She died in '08 on my birthday. So the first 3 years, I got really depressed in the holidays. I mean, well, in the holidays, but also my birthday, because I also realized it wasn't just celebrating my birthday, but I was also recognizing that this is the day that she died. So it kind of overshadowed my birthday, you know. So
sure.
I didn't
Yeah,
really practice
that
it
definitely
for.
would.
Yeah, I didn't really celebrate my birthday for like 6 or 7 years. And
Mm.
I remember the first time we went out. I was still living in South Korea, so um, we went out for some drinks and some karaoke and some Mexican food. And it was just my cousin and a few friends, and it was. I remember feeling a little guilty, like I hadn't processed what happened with my mom maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, to be quite honest. What I had done, and I thought at the time I dealt with it, was that I just refused to talk about it. I just refused to deal with it.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I would say maybe after I became a Christian, I got counseling and I started to deal with it. But I don't think I got like really full relief till around 4 years ago. That would have been 8 years after the fact, because it was so traumatic for me, and I was really debating suicide because I had like a nervous breakdown. I had to go to Thailand for about 2 months and just did a lot of drugs and drinking, and oh god, it was a very unhealthy way to deal with what I was experiencing. But uh, I couldn't function anymore. Like I literally had to spend 3 weeks in a hotel room just getting massages every day and eating steak and eggs for breakfast before I even felt like a human being anymore, because my mind just went really to the ground. So, with that being said, these days, I can't allow myself. Like, I still think about my mom every day. I don't think there'll ever be a day where I don't think about my mom at least one day, at least one point of the day. And I want my daughter to know. Like, that's one of the hardest things in the world, knowing that my daughter will never know the person who was most impactful in my life. So it is hard, and I do want my daughter to know about her. So I do plan on practicing Day of the Dead with my daughter and teaching her stories about my mom. In fact, I got a funny story to tell you, Robert. I got a really funny story. Uh, so my mom was a country fanatic, absolute country fanatic. And maybe you could tell me a funny story about your son after this, or a good memory you have, if you wouldn't mind. But my mom and my sisters, we had this talent show, and they sang together. She's in love with the boy. You know that song by Trisha Yearwood?
Uh, can't say that I do.
Anyway, it's a really good country song. So my mom and my sisters are doing this, and part of their gig was that they were all like fighting over the microphone, like who's going to be in the spotlight. So they had rigged their dresses to where they would easily rip. So they were pulling off each other's dresses, and this is at a church event, mind you. So my sister went to grab my mom's thing, and she ripped it, and it caused my mom to go flying. And her like knee locked up, and she couldn't get up. And then my mom reached in and she pulled out like a fake padding and my sister's chest. And at the end, there's a part where my sister gets all dramatic, and then my mom just like creeps behind her, starts wrestling her, and everyone's watching this, Robert, and they're like, you can hear people gasping. We have it on video. You can hear people like it looks like they're genuinely fighting. And so, funny, I didn't talk about that in a long time, but just like 2 days ago, my sister and I were talking about it. But it's one of those just classic. You couldn't remake that moment if you wanted to.
I remember once when when my boy, he was little, he climbed up on the table and he pointed at his mother. He's standing there in his diaper and whatnot. He points at his mother and goes, "Stay, woman." He's like 3 years old at the time. Oh, and she says, "Oh, I should stay. I should stay. Okay." And all he really wanted was the snack that was on her plate.
That's hilarious. I got
Oh.
another. I got another question. Do you think that animals can help people deal with trauma at all?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's been all kinds of studies on that. Just talk. Even if it's just you have one and you talk to it, because even if they
Mhm.
can't understand you, we know how healthy it is to talk things out. Even if you can't
Mhm.
talk to a person, talk to your dog, talk to your cat, talk to your parakeet, what have you. It's healthy to get those thoughts, out of you to some degree. And so they're very, very helpful in that sense. So I would highly recommend getting, if it's fiscally feasible, for somebody to get a therapy pet of some sort.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, that's good. I think when I went to counseling, one of the things that one of the first things that my counselor made me do was to draw a picture of myself with the ailment that I had as far as intimacy with women and feeling emotionally dead inside. And I drew a picture of like a board. Well, I would call it like a door. It looked more like a door, but it was a board. And it was and I was laying in the bed with the girl, and the girl was like alive and trying to hold my hand, and my eyes were like etched out. And I entitled it "Bored with Her," because my issues that I had with women, I didn't realize this at the time, but the counseling really helped me to understand this. But it stemmed from the it stemmed from the self hatred that I had of myself. Because if you don't love yourself, you really can't love
Mhm.
someone else. And so my counselor told me that intimacy has more to do with you than it does the other person. And
Mhm.
uh, when I dealt with that, I was able to get reunited with my wife after 5 years divorce. Uh, but uh, but but the thing is that they told me before we started the exercise. Hey, babe, hey, come here, baby. Hey, look at this. I do have a daughter, Robert. Mwah. I
Howard,
definitely
hi
do have a daughter.
there.
Fíjese, 안녕하세요. Fíjese, Insa, your daddy's working, baby.
Ador
And
adorable.
she's half Korean, half Mexican. She even has, you look at her eyes, she has like a cross between the eyes. Do you see that?
That's precious.
All right. So they said that there's a reluctancy to talk about the things that you've done. And
Mhm.
she actually said, if you try to cut off your finger with a knife, there would be such a natural reluctancy to do that, that it it would be hard. You see what you say? It would be hard to
Mhm.
do. So when we have like the psyche of ourselves, and what we build all this energy to make up this, prop up this person of ourselves, many times it's not true.
Mhm.
And we don't even
Mhm.
take the time to process the things that we're doing. Truly, we kind of get into like an autopilot. And when we do that, it would be like committing suicide to take that person out. And so for me, it was like I did have to commit suicide of the person who I was. And if you ever get a chance, check out this show called the Twilight Zone remake when they did it back in the 80s. And they have one starring Bruce Willis. It's called Saturday. And I'm gonna put a
Saturday.
I'm gonna put up a link in this video. It's called Saturday. And essentially what winds up happening is winds up Bruce Willis is in the movie, is in the show, and then an imposter of him comes and starts to take over his life. And it's essentially this analogy of being rebirth. We have this concept in Christianity, being born again, which means that we're dying to the old way that we were before. And I became born again at the age of 32. And what that did was it started this whole other process of healing and changing and so on. But but in that though, I think if people took the time to write, when you write things out and you can try to objectively see your side, see things that you're doing, I think a lot of people would behave really differently, Robert, because if we were to see people doing the kind of stuff that we do daily, we would be very harsh in condemnation against them. And this is what I was talking a little bit about Christians, why they resort to the things that you're talking about. One of the reasons why is because, objectively speaking, if we are doing the same things, we would condemn that. And so we have like a psychological predisposition to try to justify the things that we do. And so if you're talking to a counselor, or if you're doing art therapy, or if you're journaling, you can get your thoughts out there in kind of an unfiltered way, you know? Whereas if we're naturally going to want to justify a lot of things that we want to do, or naturally say, hey, I'm okay, right? As guys, we're just going to say, hey, I'm okay. This issue that happened to me isn't going to, like, I got to be strong for my family. I remember like when my mom died, like I didn't see my dad cry. And that upsetted me as a son, you know, like, why would you not cry when our mom died? And he's like, Isaiah, he's like, what you didn't see was that I was crying like alone because I felt like I had to be strong for you, you know. And that's part of the Mexican machismo thing that a lot of Mexican guys struggle with. You know what I mean? Where like you can't show weakness, you can't cry, you can't ask for help. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I don't know. I would just highly say journaling, art therapy, if it's possible, if it's financially feasible to get counseling, if those resources are available to you, or just doing self-help reading, you know, or even on YouTube. Whenever I came out about the trauma in my life that I dealt with as a kid, one of the most amazing things was whenever I started to YouTube people who had similar stories. That, I mean, I universally found this every time, that they were all so supportive and saying, look, hey, look, this happened to you. It doesn't have to define you. And everyone was just so, it was remarkable, honestly. It was truly remarkable. I wish I would see more of that inside of Christianity, to tell you the truth, because I do see a lot of the other end where people are condemning, people are judgmental, and that's certainly not the kind of Christianity that I have. So I wish people were more understanding. And I think, Robert, honestly, if it comes down to it, I think I know that this is number one reason why as Christians, we're so uncomfortable with the way that we actually are. Yeah, we don't want people, we go to church and we have to show one side of ourselves, when the reality is we got all this internal stuff going on. So my brand of Christianity is getting ourselves out there, loving, accepting, and helping each other. And I don't see my faith as a means to attack or hurt people. You know, that's just far be it for me to ever behave like that. So how do you allow yourself to remember or feel pain without letting it dominate or ruin your life? Because I genuinely think if you allow something like that, I easily think it could totally dominate your whole life if you don't keep that in check.
I mean,
So,
the simplest answer is that I do so by living my life. I'm sure I remember, I feel sad. I mean, anybody would. But I have other obligations to, you know, my children and myself and my wife. And, you know, there's other things that have to happen that need me to do them. So I just live my own life. I still have desires, dreams, goals, ambitions. That hasn't changed. I'm still myself. I still take pleasure in the things that I used to. The grief and the sense of loss, that's always part of me, but I don't let myself dwell on, focus, or wallow in it. I don't live as if every bad thing that happened in my life happened 5 minutes ago. You know, there comes a point where I have to move forward. And so I do. I know that for some people that can be very difficult. They, every bad thing that ever happened to them happened 5 minutes earlier, and they never move on from anything. And I've seen what that is and what that does to people and how it cripples them. And I don't want that to be me. So I just remain cognizant of where my mindset is, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, and so on and so forth.
Wow, that's really good. Really good advice, Robert. I think if you're listening out there to, as you just said, not every bad thing happened 5 minutes ago. So I think this life is going to be hurt and struggle. I do believe that this life is going to prepare us for the next life that is ahead of us. And I do believe that some people say, like, why does God exist if all this, or why does suffering exist if God exists and all that? Well, I just, if you listen to the podcast we did about the problem of evil and pain, I genuinely believe that this kind of loss, this kind of pain that we have, it's meant to contrast what we're going to experience in the next life. And how exactly that's going to play out, I sincerely apologize to you, Robert, on behalf of myself and other Christians who don't believe in that way. That's not the way we should be treating people, because that's absolutely horrific, and you or your children should not have been subjected to that. So, sincere apologies on my part, bro. But that being said,
the way I say it, people are responsible for their own actions.
Right.
It's, I appreciate the sentiment, I do, but it's one of those things. People do what they do, and they're responsible for their own actions. Hopefully they have their own kind of moral awakening and realize that's not how you should treat people. And I mean, kids are still going to be kids and will sometimes act inappropriately. Hopefully they grow out of that.
Yeah, but a lot of their parents,
who they grew up with. Yeah,
a lot of their parents.
I mean, hopefully their parents. Yeah, I mean, maybe their parents aren't necessarily teaching them that. Maybe they're learning it somehow, some other way. Maybe there's just one nasty regulator. I honestly don't know.
That being said, Robert, I really want to thank you for your time. That was you made me cry a few times. So that's a very harsh topic. It's not an easy topic, and but I really hope someone listening to this takes some advice in the things that you said, and regardless of what you or I believe in, as far as worldview, or Muslims or Jews or Hindus, we all bleed the same color, and we all experience loss the same. It doesn't matter what you believe in, one way or the other, if you're Democrat or Republican. Like, the loss, you're going to feel the loss the same way, and we might have slightly different opinions about the end outcome, but in the momentary, we are all going to feel pain and regret and remorse and absence. I know that nothing's, maybe I'll never feel 100% the way that I always wish that my mom could be my daughter, but I do believe that it's gotten a lot better. It's gotten out to the point where I can't function anymore, and my daughter's helped me deal a lot with that. So
I would point out that if your beliefs are in fact correct, then your mom will eventually meet your daughter. So that would be an inevitability. If your beliefs are correct, then she's watching, maybe watching her right now. And by the way, your daughter is just adorable. She is.
Hello, Rob. She's my daughter. Come on now.
I know. I mean, compared to mine, but still.
As soon as my daughter was born, my sister said, "Man, she's like a little clone of you, but just with hair." So my daughter has a very good mix between Asian and Mexican. So, with that being said, Robert, I really appreciate that sentiment. And if you would like to discuss, I think I'd just love to have you on, like, on a monthly basis. If you wouldn't mind. You've been such an incredible.
It's been worthwhile.
Yeah, your insights have been really invaluable to me, And you said some. Actually, I can't even tell how many times I've done this podcast. I'm just like, wow, like someone just sends chills all up my spine. It makes me think about my views from a totally different way. So this has been extremely good for me. But you've been one of the better guests. You're the first guest we've had 3 times. So really appreciate your time, and we'll have to think of another topic to have you back on next time. All right?
Well, sure. Well, we touched on a number of potential ones tonight.
Right.
You want to pick one and let me know when you want to do another one. It'd be my pleasure.
Really. All right, sometime in April. So with that being said, we want to thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you back at the next episode of RAC Podcast. Thank you.